I'm Barry Kane, American. Right now, I'm a fugitive. A couple of days ago, I was an aircraft worker. Then something happened. My best friend died in that fire. The authorities questioned everybody. I told them what I knew.
There were 2 detectives here a moment ago. They wanted to arrest you. They said that you killed him.
You don't know what it is to be hunted like an animal. To dread every door you open. To fear everybody. Even the one girl you could love.
Welcome to the 27th episode of Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock podcast. My host is, as always, Sebastian Smoliński. Hello.
Hello.
And today we have a special treat for you. As always, we will be talking about Saboteur, a film from 1942, which is a thriller, a Hitchcock thriller, but it's also a kind of a propaganda film. We will talk about that a little bit. It was made immediately after the Japanese attack on the United States in Pearl Harbor. So that was the context of the movie. Saboteur, of course, sounds a little bit like Sabotage, which is an earlier film by Hitchcock. So let's not mix those two up. Saboteur follows Suspicion and precedes Shadow of a Doubt in Hitchcock's filmography. And right away, I will say that I see many interesting things in this film, but I think it didn't age well at all. I didn't enjoy it. I think it's probably one of the weakest, in my view, of Hitchcock's films. But I will be very curious first to hear your take on it.
That's great. So maybe we'll have a kind of a heated conversation about this film. This time I will defend the movie as a whole. It's a recurring theme in our conversations, the fact that maybe not all of these early movies by Hitchcock really hold together, that they are inconsistent often, and that's true. I must say that revisiting this movie was quite interesting for me because I forgot like almost every single scene and shot. Of course, I remembered the Statue of Liberty finale. I remembered that it begins in a factory, but for example, I totally forgot one of the first shots, and actually the first one, the opening credits, which are, I think, for the first time in Hitchcock's career, they are, we can say, designed. We have this wall of a factory, so the surface is not smooth. It has these, I could say, like
vertical lines.
Yeah, vertical lines, which also influence the shape of the title itself. And I found it very interesting, like kind of pointing us towards these later great opening titles or like titles in general by Saul Bass. And then the famous shot. I think it's a famous one of the smoke coming from the right side of the screen, kind of entering the frame. And in the background we have once again this factory wall, kind of an abstract shot, and I was surprised. Wow, I remember that this movie is like this kind of a B-class entertainment by Hitchcock, derivative of 39 Steps and so on. But here in these few shots, I found a really interesting visual ideas, and I was, let's say, hooked on. I wanted to see more. And I must say that, yeah, I think it's better than I suspected, in my opinion. I have warm feelings towards this film, maybe somehow enhanced by my reading of a chapter from Murray Pomerance's A Dream of Hitchcock. Professor Pomerance is one of the leading figures in Hitchcock studies, and his chapter on Saboteur is quite unorthodox. I will mention that later. I will try to say a few words about his chapter. He goes deep into the movie, but I don't think I found it as deep. But I think it's quite interesting that this movie is considered the first Hitchcock film set in US and using US landscapes, American atmosphere, and so on. Do you see it as a first truly American movie? I will just add a footnote that some people often I think forget that Mr. and Mrs. Smith is set in New York. Maybe just set, not really exploring the city, but still. However, Saboteur has this honor, this distinction of being cited as the first truly American film Hitchcock made.
Well, I completely agree about the opening titles. I think they are wonderfully designed. And yes, I never thought of this, but it's true. This is the first designed opening sequence in Hitchcock, pointing to some later abstract ones, like North by Northwest, for example. But and yes, definitely this time when I was watching it, I watched it after 20 years, I think, and I thought about, yes, there's this American landscape, there's some, New York, there's California, so it's Hitchcock exploring the new country, let's say. At the same time, it's obviously a Hitchcock thriller in the sense that it's very closely fashioned after 39 Steps. You have the innocent man who is on the run, and with the only difference being that this time MacGuffin is not related to some abstract or semi-abstract war espionage in Europe. This time it's a very concrete espionage in World War II America. So basically the MacGuffin makes itself more significant. The MacGuffin loses its wonderful light quality of being, not attached to anything of importance. It's actually very important because this is a film, of course, made during wartime. The problems with the film start, I think, with the fact that it was designed for a different cast. There was an idea to cast, let's say, A-level actors, for example, Barbara Stanwyck,
and Gary Cooper,
and we ended up with Robert Cummings and Priscilla Lane, who neither of whom were A-class names, and you can definitely tell why, because they don't have the charisma. They are both very likable, but that's just about it. They are quite banal in they don't have any of this sort of suave air of Robert Donat, or I won't even mention Cary Grant. They are very pedestrian. So, and this takes away from the film, I think, that it's a very, very banal couple that is sort of squeezed into this Hitchcock formula. The thing that I found most interesting is that it's almost in the structure and also even in some incidents. It's like a fairy tale, because the main couple, who, by the way, start, of course, by antagonism. The woman wants to turn the man in. She thinks he's guilty of sabotage, of war sabotage, and over time she learns that he's actually innocent. And they meet a number of characters that are taken away, like from Brothers Grimm fairy tale. There's the kindly blind man who sees more than we who have vision. There's a circus troupe of freaks that's so kindly and open to the main characters, unlike the hostile society on the outside. And at some point, it's almost really like a fairy tale when Robert Cummings comes to Otto Kruger's sumptuous mansion, and it's all those the swimming pool, innocent baby playing by the pool. It's exactly like this could be Neverland, him coming to some diabolical villain who deceives everyone by being very kindly and very very smooth. So this, I think, is interesting, but as I say, I think that the quality of performance, performers, they give good performances, but they are not true stars. So it takes down for me the movie, couple of levels.
I agree with that. Maybe I would like to just provide a bit of a context, because I think we may agree that it's the first Hitchcock film with this consciously designed abstract titles, but also I think it's his last B picture, let's say. Of course, we should be cautious with that, because still it's Alfred Hitchcock after his movie won an Oscar doing another film
for Universal,
for his first film at Universal. So of course, and associations with Universal horrors are not are not out of place, because the cameraman, the director of photography, was the one who was involved, for example.
And I think Val Lewton was involved,
yes,
also, who produced many of the famous horror films. So yes, this is the first Universal production, and of course Hitchcock was sort of on loan from David O. Selznick, which is indicated in the titles.
Exactly. So he was, he was in a difficult situation professionally, because he was this asset of David O. Selznick, but Selznick was often reluctant to pursue the project that Hitchcock wanted to do. So that's why we have these breaks of several years between each Selznick production that Hitchcock directed, right? So Hitchcock is somewhere in between. He wants to explore, he wants to make movies, and he needs to find these better chances to do them. And he was quite lucky to find the producer at Universal who really liked him. And Jack Skirball was his name, and he really allowed him to do a lot of stuff, to maybe not go over the budget, but he even allowed Hitchcock to have some interest in the production, to earn more money. And he generally, he was one of these producers who were fans of Alfred Hitchcock, like Walter Wanger, who produced Foreign Correspondent. So that's this context. But of course, Universal was not the most glamorous of studios, right? It's not like Hitchcock is loaned out to MGM, which probably would have been impossible in the early 1940s. Maybe post-war he could direct something at MGM.
Well, he did. Northwest.
Oh, that's right. In the late 50s, yeah. But I'm thinking like of this noir phase that, for example, Fred Zinnemann did, this noir that we liked a lot, Act of Violence, right, in 1939. So he's making a film at Universal, and I think it's kind of a similar situation to his 1930s production. When we watch these British films, we often see puppets or like some makeshift designs, some miniatures involved. And actually, of course, it continued in British cinema up until 1940s. I was recently watching It Always Rains on Sunday, and I was struck to see that there is a single shot, relatively simple shot, of a car driving down the road, which is made as a miniature shot. 1947, neorealism is out there, changing the look of cinema. We have location, filming on location, and so on. And still in UK, in a production produced by Michael Balcon, It Always Rains on Sunday, we have this miniature shot. So coming back to Saboteur, we have many tricks in this film, efforts on the part of Hitchcock to really disguise this movie as a more lavish production that it actually was. So that's one point, and I think I agree with you with the fairy tale quality. Certainly in terms of the plot, it's quite a bit of a fairy tale, and the sequence with carnival performers is quite bizarre, but still very interesting. But I would also say that it has this dreamy quality because of these old-fashioned special effects. Of course, Hitchcock was always one to use rear projection, but here it even, I think, enhances this quality of a dream because this production was so cheap. So I think if it were a A-class production trying to be like another Gone with the Wind, it wouldn't work like that. Because of the scarcity of resources, we have many tricks, matte shots, and so on. So I think that's one thing. I agree with you that main performers are less interesting than all the others. But I think one reason to really, if you haven't seen this film, one reason to watch this film is for Norman Lloyd's performance. I think it's a really good one. So I don't know if you liked Norman Lloyd's performance in Saboteur.
Yes, but he by the way, he plays Frank Fry, who is the real saboteur of the title. I think he's effective, and of course he's immortalized by this film because it is him who is falling down from the Statue of Liberty at the end. However, it is a typecasting. It is an instance of typecasting because you know that this guy is up to no good since the moment you see him, because he thin lips, big eyes, he's sort of he has this feral quality that immediately tells you he cannot be the good guy. The good guy is the plump American boy, Robert Cummings. So in this, of course, yes, it's an effective performance. But there's not even a mystery. That this guy is guilty from the first shot, basically, and besides, he violates the American code of living by not smiling and not being nice to people. So that he's working for somebody else. But for me, the film definitely it's a fascinating insight into probably Hitchcock's political views, because and it's not even my idea. I think it's many times that people talk about this, that the film shows a mistrust of police, which is of course, as we know, in so many Hitchcock's films are presented in a bad way. He basically, it's almost like after watching the film you have to ask yourself, why is he even defending America? Because basically he shows that institutions don't work. Police doesn't work. It's only the individuals. The blind man who has the insight that the seeing characters don't. It's the carny artists who are completely on the margins of society. Even interestingly enough, in gender terms, because there's this lady with a beard. So, and these are the people who actually help this outlaw couple, which is, of course, it's deeply Christian, because it's the basic Christian message that in the 8 blessings, that the last ones will be the first ones. But of course, for Hitchcock, I think it's interesting that he just left Great Britain and he's portraying America as basically rather dysfunctional. The factory failed in securing safety. The police is terrible and is chasing the innocent guy. Everybody believes the terrible people who are giving out those wonderful parties and are posing as philanthropists, even though they are Nazi spies. And it's those little people who are on the outskirts, or even on the margins, or are blind, or that actually are the salt of the earth. So it's interesting, because it's not a usual way to present American society in wartime propaganda, and it would be interesting to, probably we will do it, to compare this with this similar trope in North by Northwest, where it will be a different moment in American history, let's say.
Exactly. So like this one is a pre-Cold War vision of dysfunctional America. Yes, I also find it very interesting, because we mentioned that Saboteur is a kind of a propaganda movie. The very title points to the obsessions of the time, fears of the time. So that's certainly it. But if we remember how much movies were scrutinized by government, by politicians, at precisely this time, of course, it was a very interesting time in American culture, because the swift change after Pearl Harbor was amazing. Before that, there was really let's say this ideological discussion between interventionists and isolationists, which continued well into the World War II, right? Just until Pearl Harbor, it was still, Americans were not sure if the government will decide to enter the war, actually, right? And of course, we have some traces of that in Saboteur. The scene with carnival performers is often interpreted as this microcosm of America, with different attitudes, and different attitudes towards democracy, right? Because they want to vote if they will accept our fugitives or not. Apparently, this scene was devised and written by Dorothy Parker, who is one of the co-screenwriters of the script. So on the one hand, we have this ideological tensions, which of course immediately reflect upon movies. Let's remember that we are talking about the year of Casablanca, right? And of course, the production of Casablanca was maybe not as fraught with ideological tensions, contrary to what the biopic of Michael Curtis suggests, the terrible movie that is available on video on demand. But still, it's like it's probably the most influential movie as ideological war project, right? Casablanca has it all: the devotion of citizens, and the change in Rick Blaine, and so on. The way he finally accepts his let's say his lot as an American who needs to help Ilsa and her husband. So here Saboteur is subversive, we could say, right? Precisely because it shows us this world full of distrust. I I had the feeling that it's kind of like, also you mentioned North by Northwest, which is a like Cold War movie, but here we have, I would say, some kind of pre-invasion of the body snatchers theme. Of course, that's maybe a bit of a far association, but still, this situation, and Hitchcock was always great at showing that somebody is not who he claims he is, right? That we have this, under the surface, we are totally different. We maybe even not be human, right? Let's say, if you're a Nazi, you're a human, but in this ideological categories, you're kind of inhuman, right? Because you follow fascism and so on. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers, another key Cold War text, has this feeling of distrust and this feeling that you don't know who's your neighbor, who is the guy that you are hitchhiking with, and so on, right? So we have these scenes here, and I think that the climax is the scene of the ball, in which Priscilla Lane, he says twice or even 3 times that it's like a bad dream, it's like a nightmare, it's like it's not real. The situation is not real, because they want to tell the guests that you're at Nazis' headquarters, actually, right? The host of the party is a Nazi, but nobody believes them. So there is this. It's almost like the very last scene, that the climax of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that nobody believes our hero. So of course, I think it's a bit of overstretching the interpretation of this film, because I think it's not really going consciously in that direction. But I think there's something to it. There is something to what you said, that its vision of America is deeply contradictory, I would say.
That's interesting. I don't know. I wish I knew more about the screenwriters of the film, especially about Peter Viertel, because, well, the thing is that in many of those wartime films, you can easily detect the exact, I would say, the communist moment, like the singing of Marseillaise in Casablanca, or, because of the writers who were often very pro-Soviet, and they were, injecting those little speeches about, the fraternity of men, and you knew that, yes, this is the moment when, the communist message is being, let's say, transmitted. But Hitchcock was from a different world. He was not an American director, so he was not part of this American club of, very pro-communist or semi-communist or, Hollywood people. He was from the outside, and he was never drawn towards that. So I think in this film, you don't really get those moments easily that would suggest something like that, which is interesting. It also brings it closer to this fairy tale. I think that for Hitchcock, it's really the evil versus good. It's not one political force versus other political force. It's evil versus good, and you are either good and you follow, people like the blind man and the carny people, or you are evil, and then you are, swimming in the pool of Mr. Charles Tobin, and you are basking in the sun. But for Hitchcock, it's definitely like a moral issue, and I don't like Robert Cummings that much, but in a way, his banality and the banality of Priscilla Lane, in a way, they work for the film, because it is a story about typical Americans who are. And I think also in Hitchcock's view, who was a British man, so he had some reserve about American people as much as he loved America. But they are extremely naive. They are extremely free of knowledge of what is happening in the world. So it's not until Barry Kane is really, falsely accused of sabotage that he needs to reckon, and he needs to see, okay, what kind of a world I'm actually inhabiting. Are all people my friends? Is this really a republic? Maybe not. But this is only because of the glitch in the Matrix. Before that, he was, smiling wildly to the secret agent, because he was taught to smile to people, and he was taught to be nice. So that's the American way. So I think, and we need to speak a little bit about the climax. I mean, it's a wonderful sequence, and using of the landmark location of Statue of Liberty with wonderful trick photography, and it's fantastic. It's such a bravura take, you know. It's like nothing else before. To use such a landmark in this way, of course, it looks forward to Mount Rushmore in North by Northwest. But yes, this is a big sequence, you know. It's like, yes, this is the reason you paid for the ticket. You wanted to see this big sequence on the Statue of Liberty. It's like today with action films and with Titanic or something like that. Yeah, this is the set piece. So it's a beautiful set piece.
I agree, and storyboarded and all. That's the stage when Hitchcock already plans everything to the last detail. Yes, I like this sequence a lot, but just let me comment on what you said about this moment of community or even of communism in movies. You're totally right, because if we agree with Murray Pomeranz, who's kind of thoughts on Saboteur I'd like to sum up now, he sees, of course, this movie as a firstly, Bildungsroman, as you mentioned, right? This our naive American hero needs to grow up, needs to see what the world is really about. And in this sense, the banal, the typical, we could even say generic face of Robert Cummings is all right. But Pomeranz places the interpretation of Saboteur in the context of American transcendentalists, right? Because we have the log cabin, which is like one of these not fairy tale but mythical spaces of American philosophy. And Pomeranz actually devotes like almost 20 pages to this sequence with a blind man, as this sequence which shows you what America may lose, but not because of the war. That's, I think, a interesting shift, but because of capitalist greed in a nutshell, right? He begins this chapter with describing the aviation industry in California in the 1940s, which was really blooming at the time because of the war, and not mainly because of the war. And then he describes this figure of a blind man, borrowed, as we may remember, kind of from Bride of Frankenstein, made in the same studio, by the way, as this conveyor, as a person who really has these American ideals at heart. He sees through people. He's an individual, an individualist, but full of kindness, charity. He has all these good things that people visiting US described as essential to America, basically, coming back to French explorers and writers. And so on. So we have this framework of Emerson and Thoreau, and for Pomeranz, this character embodies the dream of moral perfectionism, right? To quote Emerson. So I think that's pretty interesting. As I mentioned, I think this notion of a dream in this sense, very on the level of ideas, is less convincing than the idea that the movie itself is a fairy tale. But I think it's interesting that we don't have these moments of community, maybe except for the Carney performers, but because it's a movie that is heavily grounded in this idea of individualism. And maybe this is something that was inspiring to Hitchcock at the time, that he decided to devote like 15 minutes of this film to this quite strange scene with this blind man, it's a long scene. It could have been shorter, right? And we remember another scene in a cabin, Crofter's wife scene in 39 Steps.
Was
right,
it
39 Steps?
Right, yes. Mm-hmm,
which is full of pain and it shows the marital life as hell. But here we have, this clear, clean, honest, and glowing man who cannot see, but he sees more than all we.
He seems to be a widower.
Yeah. So I think it's quite interesting, and so Pomeranz sees a lot in Saboteur that, once again, maybe we don't see. But I have one quote which I liked especially about who is the real saboteur. So for Pomeranz, the real saboteurs are those who, let's say, do not understand what America is about, right? So, quote, "The saboteur is anyone, anywhere who operates out of negativity when the human spirit is imperiled." So it's all about spirit, all about preserving old America, probably 19th century America, certainly not contemporary America, and so on. So in Pomeranz's view, this movie is also about California. To a large extent, but I think once again it may be convincing to some, but on the other hand, California is mostly a backdrop, right? It's not a genuinely Californian movie as many later movies would be, like Chinatown or The Long Goodbye, and so on. But I think it's a very interesting interpretation. What I miss in Professor Pomerance's interpretation is the attention to humor in Hitchcock's work. Like, there is a lot of irony, humor, sometimes nasty jokes, which also appear in Saboteur, for example, in a scene in a theater, when we have this blend of on-screen violence and off-screen violence, and one of the viewers gets shot, and his wife discovers, oh, my husband got shot, right? So it's one of these nasty moments of Hitchcock. But still, it's an interesting reading of Saboteur as a serious film, let's say.
Well, there's one joke that's even nastier, where when the old couple sees our main character abusing Priscilla Lane in the highway, and the woman says, "Oh, they must be really in love." I think that's the nastiest joke in the film.
Apparently, in the original version, played by Hitchcock himself and by Dorothy Parker.
That was the plan.
Yes, that was actually shot even. But,
it was shot.
but
okay.
but not used.
Okay, that's too bad. That's too bad. Well, yes, I that's fascinating reading. It sounds a little bit like Stanley Cavell, I would say.
Exactly, it's heavily inspired by Cavell and by William Rothman.
Okay, it sounds really great. I think on some level it's true. I mean, it's an 80-year-old film. This year it turns 80. So, even World War II seems to be, it's a different world. It's almost a century. So I think it's reasonable to think about Hitchcock, who came to America to, who wanted to understand the society, who had some irony towards the society, but also was obviously fascinated. I mean, he would have not moved, otherwise. So here, probably he maps this America. And I think that, even the profession of Priscilla Lane, she's a model, and, she's her images are all over America, says her grandfather, right? So she's the epitome of on one hand, of the surface image of something very superficial, but then she also proves her moral, strength. So yes, I think this is probably Hitchcock, making himself comfortable with America, maybe filtering America through his sensibility. You couldn't imagine, Hitchcock engaging in like a simple patriotism, just, waving a flag. So he makes this strange film about America as a strange land, and a paradoxical land, but fascinating land. And ultimately, yes, a land with some spiritual substance to it. Whether it can be preserved, that's an open question. And we'll see in many other American films by Hitchcock, that it's probably at some point it may be lost. I would say The Torn Curtain probably says something like that. But that's far into the future. Maybe the soul of America is really lost in Bates Motel. We'll see. But this is a strange film I don't really like, but it's fun to talk about it with you.
Yeah, and Soda City as a ghost town, right? Kind of another instance of this strange America that is maybe already lost, maybe already doesn't exist, and it's just a set, right?
Yeah, so I would say, especially since we are recording this in January of 2022, and in April 2022 there will be an 80th anniversary of this film, we definitely urge you to see this film, which was a commercial hit upon its release. It made money, it was popular, it was quite well reviewed, but I cannot say I really like it. I'm definitely looking forward to our next conversation, which will be definitely about one of my favorites, which is Shadow of a Doubt. And it's also a film about American life and about California. Exactly.
Yes, I'm also looking forward to that. I think next episode will be about a real masterpiece, a major Hitchcock film. So that's great. Just two last notes. On a feminist note, I would like to symbolically say goodbye, at least for a time, to Joan Harrison, who was with Hitchcock until the early stages of the production of Saboteur. She was involved in an early draft of the script, but then she left Hitchcock. You can find the information that he groomed her, that he was supporting her career. And there's of course the whole book about Joan Harrison, who went on to become a respected producer. She already was credited with several Hitchcock films as a screenwriter, so that's definitely a great career. And Christina Lane wrote a very engaging biography of Joan Harrison, and she sums up her style. And the question is, so I will read this one sentence, and you may think who made similar movies, right? So she sums it up as that she managed to form a singular, distinctive vision, gritty, risky, wry portraits of love, marriage, and family, awash in psychological and often physical violence. To me, it sounds a bit like Hitchcock, but of course, the question is which way the influence went, right? One of the arguments of Christina Lane is that actually Joan Harrison helped to establish Hitchcock persona and Hitchcock trademark. They will work together again on television programs, Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Alfred Hitchcock Hour. So a great figure, fascinating woman.
And what is the title of the book? Let's tell to our listeners.
Phantom Lady. Phantom Lady is the title because Joan Harrison was the force behind this great film noir by Robert Siodmak. Hollywood producer Joan Harrison, the forgotten woman behind Hitchcock.
Wonderful.
So the title says it all, and we recommend it. It's a really, really good read, and many contemporary producers think that Joan Harrison was actually, the role model for later producers like Caitlin Kennedy or Amy Pascal, right? So let's remember about her. One of three women that were producers in the 1940s.
Wonderful. And I will just say we are not done yet with the propaganda films by Hitchcock because we still have Lifeboat ahead and some other films that we'll tell you about soon. But yes, this is wartime Hitchcock. So let's not remember our podcast reached that moment when, it's the Second World War and Hitchcock is already a very established filmmaker and maker of an Oscar-winning film, and will proceed with his 1940s filmography. This was wonderful. Thank you so much again, and thank you for listening. Please follow us at Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock primarily on Facebook. Please tell about the podcast to whoever you like and whoever you think would be interested in listening about Hitchcock. And this is another year of our project, so we are well into it, and we will bring you another episode very soon. So thank you so much. And this was another episode of Foreign Correspondents
Deeper into Hitchcock.